Welcome to episode 1 on Cooking with Macca. My name is Brett and I hope you get something out of this video. As I say in each episode, I am not a chef or a trained cook. So these are just my tips and tricks after cooking for many years. And in today's episode, I want to talk about some of the basic things that you need in a kitchen when you're preparing to take on cooking yourself. There are many whiz-bang cooking utensils and what have you that are advertised on TV. Some of them are endorsed by different chefs, etc. And quite frankly, some of them are great items, but they're really not something that are necessary for cooking in your home kitchen for your family or just for yourself. There is a bunch of basic items that are pretty essential, and I hope to cover off most of those in this video. And the first thing I want to talk about is fry pans. With fry pans, the latest trends always seem to be about this non-stick fry pan and that non-stick fry pan. I find that non-stick fry pans tend to be expensive, and that even though the advertisement says that they're a non-stick surface and that they won't scratch, they do tend to scratch, and the surface tends to come off. And if you read some of the stuff from reliable sources on the internet, it says that some of those things that make it non-stick are actually toxic for you. I've owned my own set of expensive fry pans that were meant to be non-stick. Quite frankly, they didn't even last 2 years. I tried to get a refund or a replacement, but I was told that that's not going to happen. I got a bit dejected with it. In the end, I ended up using a wire brush and attached it to an angle grinder and removed all of the non-stick surface and ended up with just a nice stainless steel pan. And I created my own non-stick coating on it. I'll explain that further in a moment. But as far as I'm concerned, there are two fry pans that I use on a regular basis. The first is a regular stainless steel fry pan, like I've got here. It's just a nice stainless steel fry pan with a nice long handle on it. It's got a good thick base on it so it retains the heat once it's heated up. And I use that a lot for cooking, especially when I'm cooking things like tomato-based products, because I'll go into a reason why later, but it doesn't etch away the non-stick coating that I have put on my other fry pans. The other fry pan that I use is what's called a blue steel pan. It's just a basic pan, blue metal steel, or you can use cast iron. And these come with no coating on them whatsoever, and sometimes when you buy them from the shops, they might have a little bit of rust on them or something like that. That's just a little bit of surface rust because they're not treated with anything, and that scratches off quite easily. And the way to prepare these pans when you first buy them, and down the track if you happen to have lost the non-stick surface on them, is to cover them in an oil like olive oil, just on the inside of the pan. Cover that inside of the pan with a nice amount of olive oil, and not drizzled and deep, but just enough to cover the surface completely, and then place that whole pan into the oven at about 150 degrees and let it stay in the oven for about 3 to 4 hours. And what that does is it bakes on a non-stick surface, and so then you can go ahead and cook, and provided the heat's not too high, you won't have the food sticking to the bottom of the pan. And then to clean it, simply rinse it under warm water once the pan is cooled down. Never put pans that are still really hot into the sink and rinse them, because you put pressures on the pans and the forces in the steel itself, and you'll ruin the pans and you'll end up with buckles in the pans. This is a nice flat pan, but you can buckle them if you do that with heat. And just simply rinse them with warm water and a scrubbing brush. If you use soap on these cooked on non-stick surfaces, you will remove the non-stick surface, because after all it's just an oil-based non-stick pan. And if I'm cooking with tomatoes and things like that, I won't use one of these pans. I will use just a plain stainless steel pan. The next essential item that I find you need in a kitchen is a good set of knives. I bought what was, I thought, a good set of knives, but quite frankly, they were rather expensive, but just wouldn't hold their the edge on them, and I was forever having to really hone them down to get a fine edge on them. Ended up throwing them away. Well, I've kept them as a backup, but they just sit in a drawer really. Ended up buying a really good set of knives these knives keep their edge, and all you need to do is occasionally just give them a bit of a brush with the sharpening stone just to get a very, very fine edge on them. And the brands like Global, Fury and Wusthof are quite good brands. You do pay a bit of money for them, but knives are something that you use in all your preparation of your food, and a good knife that stays sharp is worth the investment, because cheap knives do take the joy out of cooking. Whilst we're on cooking utensils and things like that, you don't need fancy utensils from fancy kitchen stores that you'll pay an absolute fortune for. Look, there is some great gadgets out there, but quite frankly, you can get some good quality stuff from your local grocery store or Asian grocery store. They have great things like these bamboo spatulas and bamboo spoons for cooking, and then flippers as well, and things like that. They're stainless steel with a wooden handle. When you use these, to maintain them and to get the most life out of them, don't put them in the dishwasher. Wash them in the sink with a bit of soapy water, rinse them off and let them air dry, and then they'll last a little bit longer for you. One of the things that you can invest in down the track, once you start mashing up and doing stuff that you need to combine ingredients, but they need to be pulverized in a certain way, is a good mortar and pestle. I recommend that you get something that's nice and heavy duty, but that's my personal choice. You can get small little ones that do a similar thing, but a nice hefty unit will stay put on the kitchen tabletop well, and then a nice pestle that will actually crush the stuff that you're putting inside them is also pretty good. And again, you can get these from your local Asian grocery store, or you can go to a fancy kitchen store and pay a fortune for them. Either way, it's up to you, but save yourself some money and get them from a local store and support a local business. So on to some of the ingredients that we use when we're cooking. And first off, let's talk about some herbs and spices. There's a myriad of herbs and spices out there, and each recipe has different requirements for them. One of the things that I find that works well is that rather than buying your spices in a glass jar like this and throwing them out every time, is if you buy some Tupperware containers like this, and you can put the labels on the side of them, and then you just buy the packets or the sachets, which are soft packaging. They're less expensive because you're paying for that glass packaging in most cases, and you're also saving the environment by having to not use glass jars all the time, even though they get recycled. The next thing is your fresh fruit, vegetables and meat. I'm always going to say in this series, try and find a greengrocer and a butcher or a fish market rather than using a supermarket. I just prefer to support local businesses, and I also find that some of the products, especially the fruit and veggies, they tend to last longer coming from a greengrocer. They're not blasted with all those chemicals to de-ripen the fruit or ripen the fruit up quickly because it's been picked so green from wherever it's been sourced from. And if it's too hard to support a local greengrocer or butcher because there's not one near you, and I know some places that is hard, go to an independent supermarket instead and support them. And with beef and lamb, in terms of meat, I prefer to use grass-fed product if I can. The meat quality I find is better, and it tastes better and is healthier for you. And with pork, any pork that you buy from a butcher store or that is not processed pork will be Australian pork. But when you're buying processed things like hams and bacons and salamis, look for the Australian pork symbol. It's a pink symbol with white writing saying Australian pork on it. That means that the pork is 100% grown in Australia and then processed here. The rest of the stuff may be processed in Australia, but is from pork that is being imported from overseas, from places like Denmark and Canada. So really support the local producers here and buy Australian product. Before I move on, I should also mention one key ingredient that I tend to use a lot of in my cooking in small amounts, albeit, is salt. I prefer to use what's called Himalayan rock salt or some sort of sea salt or river salt. They're natural salts that are occurring. I avoid using an iodized salt. Iodized salt has iodine added to it, and some people say that iodine is essential for you, but you can get iodine in most of the foods that you're eating. but it has been shown that iodized salt is not good for you. It's one of those ones that hardens your arteries up. As a kid, when I was growing up, really I only recall in terms of vinegars, two basic vinegars that were available on the market, and that was a white spirit vinegar and then brown malt vinegar. But these days there is so many different types of vinegar on the market, and thankfully Australian companies produce a lot of really good and diverse flavoursome vinegars, and there's a lot of research out there showing that vinegar is also a good ingredient for your body. Apple cider vinegar is the one that's the most trendiest at the moment, but has been around for a day and forever, and is basically the result of fermented apples in a process. And I'll be discussing that once we're cooking and in different recipes, why we use vinegar to help break down foods, etc., and give them a different flavour. Balsamic vinegar obviously is a great vinegar to use for things like salad dressings, in some cooking, and even on some fruit like strawberries. If you ever tried strawberries with a little bit of balsamic vinegar, that's great for a dessert to prepare. Shaoxing wine or cooking vinegar is an Asian vinegar that is used for made out of, I think, rice. It's good for cooking as well. And then red wine vinegar and raspberry vinegar and things like that are a great alternative to balsamic vinegar for making your salad dressings. In terms of oils for cooking, I personally tend to avoid things like canola and vegetable oil. I've been reading a lot of growing evidence around the use of the fact that they're not good for you. And if you don't believe me, do your own research and look up how canola oil is processed and the hydrogenation process that's used to get that rancid product into an edible form. The two oils that I tend to use pretty much exclusively for all my cooking are olive oil and coconut oil. Olive oil is great for cooking, and if possible, again, I buy local Aussie-made olive oil. There's a lot of companies out there now that are producing good Australian olive oils. And in olive oil, the main two olive oils that people discuss are extra virgin olive oil and then just regular olive oil. And there's a little bit of a debate about when you use extra virgin olive oil, whether you should cook with it or not. Or just use it in salad dressings, etc. I personally tend to believe that it's a very flavoursome oil, and that it's an oil that you should use for your salad dressings to give your salad dressing a little bit more flavour. And also, if you're just doing things like with something like dukkha and bread and olive oil, it's great to have with that. Regular olive oil I use for cooking, and use that on a regular basis. The other oil that has become very prominent in the market is coconut oil, and I'm not going to go into the benefits of it, but it is a saturated fat oil, and it is very healthy oil for you. It's different to oils that you see that most of them come in a liquid form. This is coconut oil. It comes in a solid form and does melt when you heat it up, but at room temperature it's a white opaque solid, and when it melts it becomes a clear liquid, and it does have a slightly higher smoke point, which is the technical term for heating up an oil to a point where it starts smoking, but it is a very good oil for cooking with, and also for eating raw if you really want to. It doesn't taste too bad at all. There is a lot of other cooking oils on the market, and then by all means go and experiment with them. There's things like rice bran, walnut, macadamia. But for me, it's not something I normally use, and so save yourself some dollars and stick to basic oils, being olive oil and coconut oil. Another essential ingredient that you need for all your cooking and is not often discussed is time. You need time to cook a meal well and to prepare a meal. A lot of recipes and things ask for a bit of prior preparation, and it's not something that you can necessarily just rush home and rip something out of the freezer and whip up. I know we're all busy, but something as easy as making sure you take something out of the freezer in the morning will save altering that meat by defrosting it in the microwave when you get home from work. Honestly, you can leave meat, you can take it out of the freezer and put it in the fridge on a plate, and it'll mainly defrost if it's in summertime, and in the wintertime you can just leave it in the sink. Make sure you cover it up if you've got cats and dogs that are in the house, so you don't want them jumping up on the table and helping themselves to it whilst you're at work. Using your meat defrosted naturally in this way also helps you cook more consistently, because if you defrost product in the microwave, then it tends to either sometimes partially cook the meat, or it denatures it in some way, and what you find is that you don't get the same consistency in the outcome of your meal, and you'll be wondering, what did I do differently, or what did I do wrong this time? And it may be just as simple as the fact that you defrost it in the microwave and it partially cooked the meat for you, and it didn't absorb all the flavours in the sauce that you've spent a lot of time making. So if possible, take it out of the freezer in the morning, think ahead. Some of the recipes that are on the market also ask you to soak your produce or whatever overnight, or for 24 hours or something like that. And you really need to respect that part of the process, because time is a key ingredient to making food. As I said in my introduction, I believe that cooking should be enjoyable and a non-stressful thing. People put their own stresses around cooking, and especially in those TV shows where they're under the pump trying to become a chef level type cook. At the end of the day, what we're about here on these videos are cooking at home, cooking for you, your family and your friends. And part of the enjoyment of that is, if you like music, then get your favourite set and playlist set up, or your favourite radio station, and listen to music whilst you're cooking in the background. It's a very cathartic thing to have music playing and be cooking, and it will further enhance your cooking experience. Well, that's all for this episode on Cooking with Macca. And remember, if you have comments or want me to show you a particular way of cooking something, then leave me a message and I'll do my best to accommodate your needs. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.